Well, it happened. Rand Carthon was let go by the Tennessee Titans. So who do I bring in? Our guy, Ken Moore. He's going to give us the real scoop of what happened, and we're going to get his take on it. Don't forget, this episode of Upload Live is powered by BetUS. Let's go. So shout out to everybody in the chat. Appreciate Power Hour going live earlier this morning when the news broke. I was at work. Again, we were kind of told yesterday it was supposed to happen. We just didn't know when, I should say, or it was going to happen. I remember Sunday night came on here at midnight, and I gave you my honest take, and I felt like it was going to happen. I don't think I was like the endorsement guy, but it did happen, and here we go. So here we're going to bring in our buddy over at K Moore Sports. You can follow him on X. You can also follow him. He's got a show on YouTube as well. So shout out Ken Moore. Thanks so much for joining the show, buddy.
Hey, man, always good to be here. A long time no see, man. How's everything going?
It's going. It's definitely going. Another horrific season. I feel like, I don't know, the Caleb Farley thing has just lived over my head forever. And it just won't go away.
It's the beginning of the end, huh?
Apparently. You got it right. You got it right about Clowney. You obviously got it right about, Farley. So I'll just dive right into it. Did the Titans get it right by firing Rand Carthon?
They did not. They did not get it right for a variety of reasons. And I think first and foremost is what the majority of Titans community has been flooding social media with today, is that it shows a lack of stability within the organization. This is a guy that you championed 2 years ago. I mean, this wasn't a quiet backdoor entry into this job. This was brought in with all the pomp and circumstance of getting to a Super Bowl, with everything that went on at that press conference 2 years ago, championing this guy as one of the builders of the San Francisco 49ers organization into the juggernaut that they have been for the last 6 or 7 years. A guy that had a vision and a focus for your program. A guy that a year later you chose to keep over Mike Vrabel, who had, for all his flaws, has been probably the most successful coach here since Jeff Fisher. So all of that to 24 months later or 12 months later, usher this gentleman out the door is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. And then, I mean, they literally, like I said, record-wise, get it. What was it, like 9 and whatever?
9 and 25 officially.
But you made the point, like, they were supposed to work together. Like, this was supposed to be Amy's thing when Vrabel came in. We got rid of Robinson, but Vrabel and Rand were supposed to work together. And then, obviously, we didn't really get – Rand gets a promotion, right? Chad Brinker, I won't even say I really know what he did at the time. He gets somewhat of a promotion, too, at the end of last year. And then we go on to this year. I do feel – one of the issues with Rand, Brian Callahan, Chad Brinker, they kind of led Amy down this road. But now I don't know if Chad Brinker's the one calling all these shots, then I don't know if it was just all Rand or even Callahan. I don't know. But it was supposed to be better. Am I correct? Like, when they let Vrabel go, they told everybody, Amy got on the whatever she was on. I forget if it was like Titans, a YouTube or whatever she was on, but she told all of us things were going to be better. Did she not?
Yeah. Yeah. Supposed to be collaborative was the word, right?
Yeah.
Collaborative. That was the key word thrown about. Vrabel wasn't collaborative. This would be a more collaborative project with Rand and Callahan. So now was it all Callahan? I mean, was it all Rand making all of these decisions? Did Callahan not have a say so in any of the free agents that came in? Did he not have a say so in any of the draft picks that came in? Did he not have a say so in any of the trades that took place throughout the season? Is he completely absolved from this disaster? I would have been perfectly okay if she would have said, look, this was a complete and utter disaster of a year, and I'm completely cleaning house. New GM, new coach, new front office. I think everyone would have understood that better than the scapegoat route of, no, that's the problem. Because did you not completely vet this guy just 2 years ago? He didn't come from Carolina. He didn't come from a disaster of a program. He came from one of the best programs in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers, the same program that DeMeco Ryans came from when he went to the Houston Texans. So one is a complete success and the other is a complete failure. It says more about your organization than it does about the individual.
And then a poll question I got really quick, so you guys have plenty of time to vote in this poll. I asked who you feel like made the final call, and I get it. It's Amy's organization. Amy's running it. At the end of the day, it's always Amy's face that's going to be on it. Do I feel like Amy was the one that was begging to have Mike Mularkey fired? Ken, you think she was the one? No, she loved Mike, right? He was part of the deal to get the job for J-Rob. You know what I mean? I thought she adored Marcus Mariota. I don't think she was in favor of like benching him, right? Same thing goes with I would even say John. I thought she really did love John, the whole Tennessee vibe and the homegrown guy, and all that kind of stuff. She got rid of him. She kept Vrabel. Then she got rid of. My point is, I feel like someone's in her ear telling her what to do. So that's kind of my question. Who was the one? Do you really feel it was Amy that felt like Rand had to go? Feel it was Chad Brinker? Feel it was Brian Callahan, which we'll get to later in the show, or Burke Nihill? 6% are saying Burke, 12% are saying Coach Callahan, who looks like he's going to keep his job, which I'm going to ask you about that here next. Chad Brinker at 23%, 60% still going strong with Amy. According to those four, Ken, I mean, I hate to use the word villain, but let's just use the word villain for sake of argument that like Rand's being totally, hey, we had to fire someone even though, they fired 4 other people, but that's besides the point. Those were guys that really kind of just went under the radar.
Right.
Even though 2 of them have been here since 1998. But if I said, hey, in the chat, how many know who John Albertson is? Including myself, I probably wouldn't have raised my hand. So of those 4, who do you see as the villain? Amy Adams, Chad Brinker, Brian Callahan, or Burke Nihill? Or so you can have multiple answers too, by the way. It could be
I'll ask you this question.
Sure.
Who had the most to gain?
Chad Brinker.
There's your answer.
Man, it just looks real shady, dude.
Who has the most to gain? Right? Decisions, and this is a message to our young viewers. Decisions about your career are always made when you're not around. You're not around when decisions are made about you getting a promotion, about you getting hired, about you getting fired. Those decisions are made when you're at home, when you're at your desk, when you're at lunch. That's when those decisions are made. Same thing in professional sports. Those decisions about Rand were already starting to matriculate towards the latter portion of the season. This didn't happen out of the blue because they lost to Houston on the last game of the season. This is something more than likely that's been in the works probably since around Thanksgiving. Probably since around they decided, you know what, we got to trade Ernest Jones. You know what, we got to trade D-Hop. You know what, we got to start making these moves and start looking towards the future. So who had the most to gain? Probably Chad. Chad and Amy probably had a lot of decisions where Chad can say, it wasn't me. I'm just the assistant GM.
Yeah.
Right? That's my role. I'm the assistant. And then you had all this other stuff coming out today, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the stuff from PK and whatnot. But I would lean towards Chad. I have no idea if I can't substantiate that, but my experience and my common sense would tell me the guy who had most to gain is probably the guy in her ear.
Could, just possibly speaking, definitely, I mean, seems like a nice guy, seems like an honest guy. Is there any possible way you could see Brian Callahan being the snake in this story?
I don't, because Brian came in after, right? He's only been here a year. And I don't know how much skin he has in it, I don't know how much of an ear he could lend. Now he can say, hey, I don't have anything to put out on the field, this meal I was prepared is trash, these quarterbacks I have are garbage, so I have nothing to work with. He could say that, but
were you
I
shocked?
think that would kind of make him look bad if he did that.
Were you shocked in the presser? Shame on the Titans for just throwing him out. I thought that was really weasel-like. I mean, just to throw him out there. But regardless of the fact, that question PK did bring up and about Rand and Chad, he didn't really it didn't seem like he really went out of his way to say a lot of endorsement type things. Maybe he said, yeah, I would assume they'd be back or whatever until I'm being told different. But am I thinking more into that as far as because Rand was supposedly the guy who hired him. And I'm thinking, well, it's a great opportunity for you to, I mean, it wasn't, I'm sure. Okay, let me put it this way.
He knew. Right?
Okay.
He knew. So you can tell by his body language. You can tell by his unassertive nature of speaking at the press conference. He knew, and he didn't want to say anything that would tip off that Rand was getting fired, nor did he want to come out and give, this glowing endorsement of Rand, knowing that he's getting fired.
That's a really good point.
He had to tiptoe around the questions so that everything was vague enough where no one knew what was going to happen today.
That's a really good point. And I just assumed, I don't know, maybe I'm just used to him. He's probably one of the coaches I don't really remember in a long time. Maybe it's just because we're coming out of Vrabel, who Vrabel wouldn't give us anything. Callahan maybe gave us too much of kind of what was going on. So I actually kind of bought him in that, but you actually make sense. Now going back, thinking of it in my mind and seeing the video of it, I think you're right. I think he did know. Titans Rossi says, all the Titans organization talked about all offseason with hiring of Callahan was communication and having an open door policy. Seems to me, Titans Rossi says, none of that is taking place. And I think, Ken, that's the most disheartening thing from this, by the way, go back. I'm sure you've seen the video, but go back and watch the day Rand gets hired. Comes to the headquarters. Everybody stands. It's a parade like. 2 years later, there's the door. It's just amazing. It is. It's just amazing. But I should not be shocked, Rand. I should be not shocked, Ken, because I go back and think, all right, yes, we can get into the whole J-Rob thing or whatever. We'll say that for a different day, but you're in first place. Nobody in their right mind would ever think about firing the GM in the middle of the season when you're in first place. You do that stuff after. And Amy, for people gloating about her on X right now, okay, she's not innocent in this. She gave John Robinson, Vrabel, both extensions, and she gave Rand an extension, and she literally fires them months later. Maybe she should start kind of looking in the mirror a little bit. That's just what I'm saying. Hopefully we don't get, a bunch of things thrown our way here on the channel. But honestly, I just, ticks me off a little bit.
What did, when you look at it on the flip side, it's like, okay, well, what did Rand do to get an extension in 1 year? Like, why would he need an extension? Now, did she only give him a 2-year contract? I don't know what his original contract was.
Oh, okay. I heard he's on the hook now, or she's on the hook for 4 more years.
Yeah, but what was his original contract? Was it a 2-year deal? Was it a 3-year deal?
That's a good question. I would hope she gave him more than that. I mean, gosh, taking a new GM role just 2 years, but who knows?
Yeah, so that's my question is, why would he need an extension after? Usually you don't get an extension until after like 2 or 3 years. You've had some success. You have 1 year left on your deal. That's usually when you get a contract extension. If you've done really well right out of the box, or you're coming up on your contract year, which I'd assume neither would be unless he only had a 3-year deal where he would need an extension.
True. People are talking about in the chat. I don't want to keep them waiting. It is a major development to the story. Honestly, I'll give you TD's take on it. He basically shut the door on it, but I did want to get your opinion on it. So we heard obviously the record. Maybe people would get on him for the trade with Kansas City. I know that would have been a pretty high draft pick now, if you think about it, where we're drafting, but Rand's not knowing that. Rand brings all these free agents in I don't know. Not that I know anything, but it does, for me personally, looks like Tyler Boyd would be a great example of this. Comes to this new modern offense from Cincinnati where he had 65 receptions last year with a backup quarterback and Burrow, who was hurt. I mean, heck, we beat him 27-3 last year. Comes there. I don't even think the guy got 40 receptions. Never really was in flow. Played the whole game. Might have got a couple looks early. You don't hear from him. I think obviously body language, he's frustrated. Didn't play in the last game. I don't know if the guy's hurt or not, but I don't see him coming back. But people in the chat are already bringing it up. I'm going to ask you now. A piece came out, obviously, by shout out to Paul Kaharski. I would assume he got this from Chad Brinker. I mean, too many connected dots here. But it's almost like they're trying to explain why Rand got fired and then this whole laziness thing. So there are 2 examples I got. If you have more, Ken, let me know. First one was the example of leaving Will Levis's pro day early at Kentucky. And the second one was instead of like breaking down film and keeping more up to date right after a game, they said on the plane ride home or something, he just kind of took naps or something like that. So have you heard any more than just that to categorize him as lazy? I mean, are those the 2 main ones? I know I'm laughing too. I'm laughing.
Those are sleeping on a plane. I didn't know that was a crime.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know
Especially how bad they got beat.
Shocking that sleeping on a plane is a crime. I'm sure you wasn't the only one to sleep.
No, I was sleeping too.
Lord have mercy.
Games.
Let me address those 2 things.
First of all, who do you think said those comments? You think it was Chad?
Someone inside the organization, right? Because I won't say Chad said that. I'll just say, obviously, I would assume if what PK reporting is factual, then it would come from someone inside the organization. And I always say, who has the most to gain by leaking something like that?
Yeah.
So that may be the guy that's taken over the position. That may be the person who did the firing. It may be one of the persons in the room that came to the decision to fire him. So whomever that was, I will say this. When you character assassinate someone on the way out the door without evidence of that allegation, then again, you make your organization look bad. What is the point of trying to character assassinate this man on the way out the door? Again, it makes you look like complete idiots because you're the organization that just hired this guy 24 months ago. It's not like you hired him 7 years ago and then over the course of time he got lazy.
Yeah.
If that's the case, right? There would have been some information to that when you asked for references from the San Francisco 49ers and any other organization that he worked with. And I'm sure they would have shared with you that type of information. He probably wouldn't even have been employed still with the San Francisco 49ers if those were traits of his character. So those things sound completely idiotic to me for both of the reasons that I just mentioned. Now I'll get personal with it. Okay.
Please do. Please do.
Because as an Afro-American man, whenever you're not successful on your job, that's one of the first things that people like to throw out. Oh, well, this individual's lazy. They don't like to work. They don't like to put in the extra time. They were sleeping on the plane, or they took an extra 10 minutes at lunch, or, whatever the situation is to justify the individual no longer working for your organization. So I find all of that to be absolutely stupid. If the man took a nap on a plane ride home from San Diego or from Los Angeles to Nashville or from Buffalo to Nashville or from Houston to Nashville, he's not going to learn anything on an hour and a half flight.
Yeah.
Watching film of what just happened. You learn that stuff when you get in your office. I'm sure he has a home office that he can sit up and watch film and break down whatever happened. And isn't that Coach Callahan's job to break down film? I didn't know it was the GM's job to break down the film right after the game.
Good point.
I hadn't heard that one before.
You're right.
Now, you may be breaking down film of your practice squad players or players on other teams' practice squad that you may want to bring into your organization, or other teams' players that you may want to trade for. There's no need for Rand to be breaking down film of what the hell Will Levis is doing on the plane ride back to Nashville.
Yeah.
For what? For how? For why? That's why you have coordinators. That's why you hire coaches. That's why you delegate. So that's completely asinine and stupid.
So TD, Teron Davenport, just I don't need to know any. I gotcha. But Teron Davenport is gonna debunk the first one, and then I'm like, I'm done. I don't need to know anymore. This is ridiculous. So from what his standpoint was, he already if you're TD, I mean, I can't imagine this coming out and you're like, wait a minute, I already asked him that months ago when that whatever came out. And apparently, according to TD, like, this pro day went like 30 or 40 more minutes than it should have. And he had a prior arrangement. And that leads me to, now you're getting into my personal time. What if Rand wasn't feeling well? What if Rand was resting his eyes but trying to process? We all process things differently you know what I mean? I'm not like going to compare myself here, but what I would say is I used to be a varsity girls head coach. So excited to get the job. My record, Ken, was 3-43. One of the worst coaches ever at my high school. And I tried, and those girls gave me everything. They tried. I mean, it was just hard because, ball handling was trouble. Couldn't get across half court. There was one game, I'm not lying to you, man, end of the third quarter, it's 40-0. Like, what do you tell the girls when you're down 40-0? I can't go out there and do anything for them. They're trying. But my point is, like, those bus rides home, I'm not right on my freaking laptop or cell phone trying to figure out. I know it's bad. Let me process and deal with that. But like I said, TD put that to rest. He was on Jared Stillman today. So if any of you go to Spotify or whatever, I believe it was the 3 o'clock. He's 2 to 6. So it would have happened at 4 o'clock my time. So if you're trying to find that, it's real easy to find. And he gets right into it. So shout out to TD. I know he's been with Rossi on this channel many, many times. But yeah, I'm taken back. It's almost like you got someone down. They can't defend themselves. They can't even say anything. And then you come out with all this stuff. Where was this stuff months ago when it was going on? If it was that big of a deal, shouldn't this have come out months ago? No, we're going to wait to the end of the year and then fire him. And then, eventually let out. So, yeah, it's a bunch of crap. And it makes your organization look like hogwash, which leads me to my next point. You have the number 1 pick. And maybe I don't know your take on Sanders. I don't know your take on Ward. I don't know your take on the quarterback position. But if you really love Sanders and his dad's going to be involved, you go Titans. Way to sabotage yourself because there's no way he's coming here now.
Nope. I told a friend last night, we were texting, and I think you and I were texting a little bit as well about what may happen today. And I said, if they fire Rand, they had one play. They had one card in their back pocket where it would still be possible situation to salvage Shador if that's who you want. And I'm not even convinced that's who they want. But if that's who they want. And Dion, Coach Prime, has made it pretty well known that he's a big fan of Louis Riddick. He's endorsed Louis Riddick because I think he interviewed with the Jets last week for their general manager job. And he went to social media to say, hey, y'all need to hire this guy. Not for Shador to go to the Jets, but just because he's a big fan of Louis Riddick. So I thought if we did, fire Rand, that there would be another legitimate general manager coming into that seat. In no way that I think it would be the assistant general manager being promoted to that seat and then saying, well, we're going to hire a general manager who's really not going to be a general manager. They're more going to be like a college scout. Why in the hell would I want my son to come play for your organization? Why? No, I won't. So having covered Coach Prime like I did when he was at Jackson State, I cannot even envision him entertaining the idea of Shador coming to Tennessee. And hell, he may, if they're interested in Travis Hunter, he may try to steer them away from Travis.
Oh gosh, you're right about that.
So you may be in a position where you're down to Cam Ward, which I haven't seen a lot of Cam Ward. I'll have to watch a lot of Cam Ward during the offseason because I didn't see a lot of Miami during the college football season. So I'll have to do my research on Cam a lot harder. But you're probably going to be down to a decision of Cam Ward or trading the pick. Because I don't see Travis Hunter. I don't see Shador Sanders. I just don't see it. Because if you draft either one of those kids, I think you're going to have issues on your hand because of the events of the last 24 hours.
Do you think there's anything? Shout out to DeMario. Shout out to all you guys in the chat. I've been trying to keep up and put some of these comments. They're great comments, by the way. Do you think there's anything with Dion commenting right away on this, or you think that's just he happened
No,
to see it? And
I
then,
think he was shocked.
yeah,
I think he was shocked by it. I think a lot of people were shocked by it. I don't know how much Dion is in the know. If he had, privy to any of the rumors that were going on, but I'm sure he was shocked, like a lot of us were.
so we're gonna take a steer away, and we're gonna actually look into some things with Chad Brinker. And my question I wanted to pose to all of you with the topic of tonight's show is: did the Titans make a major mistake firing Rand? And ultimately, is this going to lead us to more wins down the line? Or like Ken just said, yeah, this could have a big impact on not only, Dion with Shador Sanders, but also with Hunter. Those are your top three possible guys that are going to go in the draft. And two of the three you might have already ticked off. And now all of a sudden you can't be trusted. Plus, what about free agents? I know some of you in the chat were talking about, and we brought this up the other day. Rand didn't hit on everything, but now I'm not so sure. Which I'm going to lead to this next segment here. I'm not so sure Rand was the only guy making these picks, and I'm going to talk about that next. But before I do, shout out to our friends over at BetUS. Use that promo code YouTube150 for 150% bonus on your first deposit, 125% on deposits 2 and 3, up to $2K. So again, BetUS. Promo code, it's running out. The football season's almost over. YouTube 150, 150% off your first deposit, or a bonus on your first deposit. Plus, great turnaround speed. They got a lot of fun things to bet on. Plus, they got this new casino feature, which we won't talk about tonight, but we'll talk about it down the line. But we did want to shout out our friends over at BetUS, and thanks that all they did for the channel over this year. So I do have Ken. You can still hear Ken, and we'll bring him back in. But I did make this on the fly, and Ken knows my tricks here. But I did go on the Titans website, and my thing is in the chat is I wanted to find more about this Chad Brinker guy. Because, I knew a little bit about him. I didn't know the Packer thing. But when I dove more and more into this, I get more and more afraid and more like, hey, maybe we did make a huge mistake here. So Chad, obviously, as Ken said, who had the most to gain? Chad Brinker did. All right. Now Chad Brinker's in this catbird seat. TD made a point earlier about putting on clothes. So I have a sweatshirt on. You talk about putting on an undershirt and then maybe putting on like a coat. If you drenched me, my undershirt's not going to necessarily get wet. My sweatshirt probably will. My coat will. I'll have to take both of those off. He was putting that into context of the Titans organization, and that undershirt would be Chad Brinker because he's all protected from all this. Mayhem. I think of that Allstate commercial with the mayhem. And that's what I think of the Titans. So I'm not going to go line for line, but you guys can see this. This is the experience. Real quick, a couple things to note. Number one Super Bowl over the Steelers. What I found ironic about that was Chad Brinker's first year. So I can't even give him the ultimate credit that it's because of Chad Brinker that they won the Super Bowl. I get it. He was part of it. His first year. Yada, yada, yada. I don't think you can view that as a end-all, be-all. Yeah, they did win 8 titles. You see what he worked as a scout, and he's got a lot of different experiences, which we'll get to the next slide with Chad. And again, I'm not trying to just diss him, so if you like him in the chat, I'm not. Those are the 4 guys that got fired, by the way, and the executive department or whatever it was. But 2 of those guys, Albertson and Pastrana, those 2 guys have been around since 1998, and they got the axe today. So ultimately, those would have been transitioning from Oilers to Titans. So I do want to give those 2 shout out for all their service over the years, but that's a shame. Over 20 years of service, shown the door. See you later. Don't let the door hit you on the way out of there. We'll see if we hear more about them. We can see his current role with the organization, and Ken and I wanted to clarify this before. That's why I asked Ken before the show. He was brought in the same year as Rand Carthon. And what makes this more interesting is I'm going to go back to you, Ken, and I'm going to pull up it directly from my little PowerPoint here. I got my PowerPoint pulled up. What I found interesting, if you go to the Titans website, it says that Chad Brinker was a role in hiring Brian Callahan, adding 14 new free agents, being a part of the draft class. Like, they aren't shying away of his impact. So going back to you now, this stuff doesn't make me feel any better. This makes it seem a lot worse. You say all these things he's doing. He's part of the problem. How do we know he wasn't the one that said, hey, we need to trade for Will Levis? Or, you know what I mean? We need to push Will Levis. How do I know that now? And all this other stuff. It just seems like, Rand, if it works out great, here's Chad Brinker on your top. If it works out not so well, you're fired. I keep going. I'm clean. Website doesn't tell me he's clean, Ken.
No. His hands are as dirty as Rand Carthon's when it comes to everything that has happened in this organization since John Robinson left, for better or for worse. He had a hand in hiring Brian Callahan. He had a hand in the draft. He had a hand in free agency. He had a hand in the trades, right? Now, was he the final decision maker? Probably not. But from Amy's words, everyone was collaborating. So that would have been him, Vrabel, and Rand, and that would have been him, Callahan, and Rand. The only two people that are different are Callahan and Vrabel. The two constants are Rand and Chad, right? Those are the two constants.
Yep.
So you can't separate them. You can't separate them. But as I mentioned a few moments ago, those conversations between Chad and Amy, or Chad, Brian, and Amy, all those conversations are being had with Rand not in the room. Now, maybe there were some conversations, I hope there were some conversations between Amy and Rand at some point during the season as to, what's going on, what's happening. Obviously, we know last year at the trade deadline, there was the offer that the Ravens made to the Titans for Derrick Henry. And I believe it was Amy who made the final call on that trade, if I'm not mistaken. That no, we're going to go ahead and keep Derrick because I think we won that game against the Falcons. So there was
she wanted money though too. Come on,
right? Yeah, there was a small way of hope, but he was the cash cow to keep people coming to the stadium, right? So she decided to keep it. I'm assuming, but yeah, with his track record the last 2 years, I don't know how he gets to, as you mentioned, be protected, be the undershirt underneath the coat and the hoodie and the t-shirt, and not get wet and not get muddy in this whole thing.
Edgar. Okay, I'll get to some more of the comments, but Edgar puts, it's all speculation. How do we know it wasn't Carthon? But you guys are blaming the guy that wasn't fired. Weird. Again, I'm not trying to put blame. I'm just telling you what I see, and I am going over this because we don't necessarily see this. Rand's the GM, and I talked about this Sunday night too, Rand. I felt like Rand's first year, so many people like Rand wasn't the GM, and I took it the other way, and I'm like, okay, I get where they're saying like Vrabel, they're assuming Vrabel called all the shots, but I also look like, hey, if I'm a new GM and people act like I don't exist, then ultimately, like, what am I doing here, right? Like, if it's all Vrabel, whether it works out or it doesn't, I didn't think that was fair to Rand either. He was a part of it, and I thought he was a little bit of a part of it as well. But now going into this whole thing with this year, I'm just like, okay, Chad Brinker is just a big of part of this than Rand is. So Chad stays and gets another promotion because what we heard today was who's going to be the end-all, be-all calling the shots when they hire a new GM. Who's got final say? Chad
Chad.
does. Yeah,
Chad
Chad does. So if I'm a new GM, why the heck am I coming to Tennessee when I could say, hey, Will Levis, he sucks. He needs to be gone. But I got to run it by Chad first? I mean, I don't know the answer to this. How many organizations run with the GM, but they always have to ask for permission? Isn't that called an assistant GM that maybe does that? I mean,
and that's the issue. And I don't know if any of you guys saw Mia Kimes today, and I didn't see it live. I just saw a couple of clips of her on NFL Live. And to me, it was important to hear from her as a female journalist, because a lot of times when we, or mostly male fans or journalists, attack Amy for being impulsive or doing things without ration, we're kind of called sexist or whatever because we're attacking a female owner. But it was good to hear Mia Kimes go in on the Titans, and she went in on Amy today. And I would urge any of you, go find it on YouTube or NFL Live, ESPN, about her impulsiveness of continuing to say one thing and do something else. She's preaching patience to the fans, but then she's not showing patience in her decision making when every year you're firing a key member of the organization, whether it's J-Rob, whether it's Vrabel, whether it's Rand. Who's it going to be next year? Is it going to be Brian Callahan when they go 4-13? Or are you just going to have a new coach then and start over again? So it's not that we're trying to attack Chad. What we're trying to deduce is who had the most to gain. We're trying to make an educated guess as to how this decision came about, who had the most to gain from it, why is one person getting strays on the way out of the door, and then furthermore, trying to spin it forward as to what does the future look like for this organization? Or are we going to be back here in 12 months talking about, well, who's going to be the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans? Or who's going to be the next general manager of the Tennessee Titans? Or who's going to be the next quarterback of the Tennessee Titans?
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to figure out. And that's why we're having this conversation.
So here's where I'm going to go with this. Brian Callahan. Should he have been fired?
I absolutely think you had to fire both or fire none. I've been very open for most of the year in that I haven't seen anything from Brian Callahan that leads me to believe that he will become an effective NFL head coach. And it's not just because of the record. I'm not basing it on 3-14. I'm basing it on what I see in play calling. I'm basing it on what I see in press conferences. I'm basing it on what I see in player development or lack thereof. I'm basing it on what I see in inconsistencies, where the defense can play lights out one week and they look like complete garbage the next week. Those are the things I base my Brian Callahan frustration on. When Dan Campbell took over the Detroit Lions 3 years ago or 4 years ago, even though they were losing games that first year, you could see that team played hard. They didn't have the talent. They didn't have the experience, but you saw that team played hard. When Mike Mularkey came here, he had a vision. We're going to be smash and dash, or whatever he called it. The phrase was smash mouth football, Smashville. He had a culture that he wanted to instill in this football team. When Mike McDonald went to the Dolphins and they were horrible after the Brian Flores fiasco, he was like, hey, we may be bad, but we're going to score a lot of points. Our defense may suck, but we're going to be entertaining. What are the Titans? What's their identity? We don't have a great defense. We don't have a physical team. We don't have a running team. We don't have a passing team. We just have a bunch of guys that just out there playing football.
Hey, we're not soft. We're not soft, Ken.
We're not soft.
And he can say a few F words. So everyone thought that was all hunky-dory when he did it. If Vrabel does it, it's like, oh my gosh. Callahan does it. Here's the other issue. Who supposedly hired Brian Callahan? It was Rand, right? But I mean,
it was Rand, but I mean, Amy actually made the final decision.
Yeah, she made the final decision. But my point is, if you're firing the guy who hired or was a big part of hiring this guy, they didn't win. And you made a great point. They were lifeless in some of these games. I get it. They won at Houston. I thought that was enough to get them everybody their job back because that's Amy's Super Bowl. But then they lost in the Oilers uniform, so everything went out the window. But that's my point. Like Washington. Remember the Washington game? That was coming off a win after the Houston game, right? They were awful in that game in the beginning.
Yes.
3 and outs left and right. Turnovers. Defense couldn't stop anyone. But that's my point. Callahan gets a pass. And all I hear from, is, oh, well, he's just a one-year coach. But again, who hired him, supposedly? And you're going to blame him. That's why I agree with you guys in the chat, and I agree with you. Like, I just don't understand how one guy stays and then the other guy. I mean, you guys in the chat, like, put yourself in Rand's shoes and how you can go home and explain this one. I don't know how you explain it.
Well, here's the funny thing is that, really not funny, but so Gerard Mayo gets fired in New England after 1 year, right? Everybody goes crazy, in the media, how the Patriots did him wrong. He should have got more than 1 year, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then Robert Kraft, I give Robert Kraft credit for at least getting in front of the freaking microphone and addressing it and saying, hey, he wasn't ready to be a head coach. We put him in I think his phrase was an untenable situation. We should have gave him more time to develop. He's going to be great in a few years, but he probably wasn't ready for this, blah, 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 blah. And then today, Antonio Pierce, 1 year on the job, gets fired. Haven't heard from Mark Davis. Don't know what the reasoning was, but he gets fired, right? But Callahan, same deal. 1 year, first year, he gets to skate, but we're going to scapegoat the GM, but there's no accountability for the head coach. I don't know. Seems a little weird to me. Weird to me.
Cole Anderson, did he still get to keep his job as far as we know?
Well, I haven't heard any coaches getting fired, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any Todd Downing like scoops today, so
oh God.
So I'm assuming the staff will be intact. Now the question will be, and I think someone asked him at the press conference, Brian Callahan, about an offensive coordinator. And I think he said something to the extent that, he doesn't feel like he needs one, but if they ask him to get one, then he will. So, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out if they force him to get an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think he should. It's hard for him to focus on the special teams when he's on his tablet. You know what I mean? He's on his tablet watching the stupid offense, can't do nothing right. And then special teams disasters are no wonder why Cole Anderson still has his job. I mean, I don't know. I'm just floored. Final take as the show's ending. What's your level? I mean, it's a dumb question. Let's skip that because I know the level of confidence in the Titans organ. I mean, it can't be high, but the draft. So the number one pick, I mean, this is totally like a side point here with what news broke today, but what do you think ultimately the Titans will do with the number one pick? And then what would you do with the number one pick if the Titans wiggled you to be the GM and supposedly, I don't know if it worked out great. Chad made the call, but if it didn't, it'd be your call. But what would you do? What you think the Titans are going to do, but what you would do?
Right. So if I have confidence that Cam Ward, because again, as we mentioned, I think Shedeur and Travis are probably out of the picture. So if it's down to Cam Ward, I'd really have to do some research on Cam. I think he did start a lot of games in college, so I think he has the experience. I think he has the arm. He's raw. I need to go through the combine. I need to go through the interviews. I need to go through the vetting. If I'm comfortable with Cam, then I would go Cam. If I'm not comfortable with Cam, then I have to explore the possibility of trading down and seeing what I can get to, try to stock load, similar to what the Titans did, I believe, in 2017 when we had the number one pick and Jared Goff was on the board, and we were able to flip that pick into Derrick Henry and a few other good players. So I have to look at that type of scenario. And then look at, okay, who are the quarterbacks coming out in 2025, 2026? And no, Arch Manning is not coming out, guys. He's not leaving Texas after 1 year of being the starter. He will be there to 2027. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I know. That's why I'm wearing this. So Arch Manning will be at Texas for at least 2 years. He makes way too much NIL money, okay? He doesn't have any starts under his belt. So he needs at least 20 starts to be ready to play in the NFL. And the only way Arch gets that is to be the starter at Texas for 2 years. So just to end all of that nonsense. All right, cool. So looking at the other quarterbacks in the draft, you have to see who the other quarterbacks will be in 2026. So it's too early to tell. I'm sure me and you will be chopping it up about that, after the Super Bowl as they get into the combine. But right now, it's one of two choices. It's Cam Ward or you trade down.
There you go. I love your honesty. I love your honest takes. And like I said, I don't know if I ever want to be on the draft again with you because I feel like I cursed it. I mean, that was an ultimate. I was so excited, and you're just shaking your head. But ultimately, you were right, man. You were right the whole time.
I wish I was wrong.
I know.
Trust me, I wish I was wrong. I wish Caleb Farley would have developed, and he was our starting corner on one side of the ball and a shutdown corner and an all-pro. I would love to have been wrong about that. But there's certain positions you can't draft injured players. And that's one of them.
Oh, man. I'll tell you what, just when you think things are going to be brighter, and it's just like you remember we've never won a Super Bowl, and that's part of the problem, man. Hey, real quick, though, because you lived it, like I was born there, and I got to come back. I think it was my freshman year for the last year when the Astrodome was open. I remember we played Carolina. I think we lost like 31-3. But it was empty, like literally 6,000-7,000 people sitting where you want. They had that recently in Nashville. I know the weather and stuff like that, but do you think if they didn't pass the stadium yet and it was still in the docket that it would pass going forward? Out of what's your general sense out of Nashville with, because the stadium, it's right now it's a train wreck, dude. It's like you got to sell all these PSLs.
When is it supposed to open?
2027.
2027. We got 2 years to fix this. Let me ask the chat this question.
Perfect.
In 2027, when the stadium opens, Do you think Brian Callahan and Chad, that is just so bad, man, the way this is unfolding. My question is the season opener next year a sellout? Are there more than 30,000 people there for the season opener next year? Especially if you don't have a Cam Ward or a Shador or a Travis Hunter, you don't have a number one pick to build your offseason around and to build your season ticket fan base around. If you trade down to number 7 and you're drafting an edge rusher or, another offensive lineman, someone that's not going to sell tickets, and you're trotting Kirk Cousins Jr. out there, or Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, or name your free agent quarterback out there, who's gonna buy tickets and go to these games? I mean, it is just an utter disaster that did not have to be by Amy. And I don't know what she was thinking. I don't know who got into her ear, but she had to have some forward thinking as to how does this affect the kids that are in line for the number one pick.
Yeah.
That can actually sell tickets, be the face of the franchise, give this team and this organization some hope. Because right now it's hopeless. And that's not a place that you want to be as a fan base, as an organization. I think it's a lose for Amy too, because I think she's getting some really bad advice from the people that she's surrounded herself with. And so in a way, I kind of feel bad for her, because I think she does love the franchise. I think she does care about Nashville. I do. And I think she's really getting some bad advice from people who have their own self-interest at heart and not what's best for the Tennessee Titans overall.
And their whole season ticket gift debacle. I mean, that was horrific.
Delaney Walker?
With the Delaney Walker 2023, heard excuses about that. There's no excuses. I don't care if they're delayed 2 years. You still don't give them out. And if you do, have fun with it. Just give them out at one of the games for free. I mean, I was a season ticket holder for years, man, when we sucked. And nobody wanted any part of them. And for all the money, they go up every year. And now they're really pushing you to buy those PSLs. That's ultimately insulting. And somebody should have lost their jobs. But apparently they're telling us that probably was Rand Carthon, right?
Or one of the guys that got fired, the director of football terminology, or
Brent
whatever the hell the titles were. They're the people that got fired today. I think somebody asked in the chat if Texas was going to beat Ohio State.
Yeah, go for it.
Man.
Ohio State looks good, dude.
I am very nervous. Sark has not had his best coaching the last month or so of the season. That's a very dicey game. I wouldn't put my money on Texas in this one. I'm rooting hard for my Horns. We may find a way to pull it out because we're going to have the home crowd advantage in Dallas. But that's a scary. I think the winner of this game will win the national championship, because I think either one of these teams will beat Penn State or Notre Dame in the championship. But man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
What is your, real quick, since we're talking college football,
I'm good.
What would you do differently next year if you put it in a couple sentences? What would you do for the football playoff? Do you think it's just right? Change this, change that, or what would you do differently?
So a couple of things. And for those that don't know, I do college football for
call
ESPN.
College games. Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
They know who we are. They know.
Yeah, no problem. So you have to get rid of the automatic buys for just the conference champions. That has to go away. You can come to the party, Boise State, Arizona State, but you're not getting a buy. That's crazy. So that's the first thing. You got to get rid of that. So the buys should just go to the best 4 teams, in my opinion. You know, whatever the rankings are, 1, 2, 3, 4, those 4 teams get the buys. And then Boise State, Arizona State, you can come, but you're playing in the first round. You know, whoever the rest of those teams are. And then I would probably reseed like the NFL does after the first round. So you don't have an Ohio State playing in Oregon.
Oh, Oregon, I feel bad
Oregon's
for them.
first game is Ohio State. That's just insane. You know, they should have been playing Arizona State or SMU or, Boise or whatever. So Oregon got completely hosed in that scenario. So they just got to change how they do the ranking and how they do the buys, and I think it'll be fine.
What do you think about second round being at the school's higher seeds home? Like, I feel bad. I know you didn't get a bye, right? Did you get a bye? I don't remember.
No, we didn't.
No, you played in the first round, right? So you got that home feel.
First round at home.
But let's take Oregon. Oregon's undefeated. They win the Big Ten. They win the Big Ten championship. They already beat Ohio State at home, but their first game should be in Eugene, I would think. And I get it. The Bulls, you got to do something fancy, but I just feel bad for those teams. I agree with you with the reseeding, but I'm just thinking Oregon here. Like, Ohio State still probably would have won, but it would have been, I feel like, a lot closer and just different. And it's just something about playing on campus opposed to these big stadiums. It's just, I don't know. That's just my take.
I'm okay with the second round being in the traditional bowl sites because I think it's a big deal for Oregon and Ohio State to play in the Rose Bowl. You kind of keep that Big Ten, Pac-12 tradition, even though there's no more Pac-12, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm okay with that. The traditional bowls still getting their games and getting those marquee matchups, because if you throw in an also ran into those bowl games, like if you throw in Wisconsin, a fourth place team versus USC, it's not going to happen. The Rose Bowl's just going to die if you do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I think it's very important to keep those major bowls because all of the small bowls have already died,
Yeah.
So you want to keep those major bowl games viable. So I'm okay with that.
Shout out to Titan MVP for the super chat. He puts, this the most disheartening and disappointing. More time should have been given. As a positive as I am upload, I just don't know this time. And I feel like overwhelmingly that's kind of the gist of, at least in the chat. But I'm just saying, if you go on X, at first nobody thought Rand was going to be fired. Nobody wanted, for the most part, I don't think majority of people wanted Callahan to be fired. They did preach patience, but I'm starting to notice a little swing now, and I just need to stay off Twitter. You know how I feel about people that have, one day they say this, the next day they just totally change their tune based on what just the Titans do. But no, I just have a hard time. I think I agree with a lot of you in the chat. Like, if you're going to blame Rand, I guess, whatever. But looking at the Titans website, which you guys could go do right now and look up Chad Brinker, it's got the whole bio on there. And he gets his accolades for putting this team where it is right now. They're actually shouting him out. I have a problem with that. And he's the only, I get it. These 4 other guys got fired, but the main piece was Rand, and he doesn't get a chance to defend himself. And now he's all of a sudden lazy because he sleeps on a plane and leaves early, even though it was extended 30 minutes and he had a prior arrangement. I don't know, man. Disheartening. Yeah, I agree with you, Titan MVP.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And thank you guys so much for the chats and the conversation. And I'll say this before we go, man. I am not here to defend Rand 100%. There were a lot of things in the offseason that I did not agree with. I did not agree with giving Calvin Ridley the amount of money that we gave Calvin Ridley. I did not agree with giving L'Jarius Sneed the amount of money that we gave L'Jarius Sneed, because I've seen the Malcolm Butlers and the Vic Beasleys and the Jadeveon Clowneys. I know what free agency is. I know what it is.
Julio.
And Julio Jones. Yeah, I mean, there's countless examples of guys, and not just in this organization. I mean, it's all over the league. That's why you have to be very careful in free agency with the money that you give guys, because sometimes they don't perform when they get to the second team the way they perform with their original team. So you have to be very careful with that. But with that, I think his drafts were mostly good. I can't. There's no Isaiah Wilsons or Caleb Farleys or any of those guys floating around the organization.
Traylon Burks.
Traylon Burks. Thank you. That have come in and competed and that are on the roster and doing good things. So has he been perfect? No. But you can't run your organization like this and expect to compete with the Buffaloes and the Kansas Cities and San Franciscos and the Green Bays, and the Detroits. You're going to be down there with the Jaguars and the Cardinals and the Panthers. You're going to be down there with those guys. And that's not an area that any of us
no.
live in.
This whole division's a crapshoot. The only one that's got some life right now is Houston. And I don't know what Stroud ultimately is going to end up being, but I think we would all agree Stroud's maybe a little sophomore slump, but they won the division. They're going to the playoffs. We're nowhere near that at this point, and I thought we would be at some point. But, hey, man, I appreciate you coming on. If you guys could help us out, tighten up that like button on your way out of here. Ken made some great points, so if you missed them earlier, definitely go back. I guess we froze up at one point, but I was asking Ken about the new stadium, if things would be a little bit different if the stadium hasn't officially passed in Nashville based on what, him living in Houston and going through the Oilers, and then now the last game in Nashville, which they were literally, I know the weather was bad and we only had 3 wins, but it's just brought back some bad memories, some bad signs. So if you, like I said, you guys could tighten up that like button. Appreciate you guys giving up your time. We'll keep an eye on things. It's always been a pleasure, Ken, having you on, and thanks so much, buddy.
All right, my man. Always a pleasure. Tighten up.
And that you could go follow Ken at Kmore Sports on X and also on YouTube. And as he's mentioned, I know a lot of you really love Ken Moore. That's why you're here. But yeah, he also calls games on ESPN for college football. There's that. So we're lucky to have you, Ken. Thanks so much, buddy.
All right, guys. Y'all take care.
So that was Ken Moore. Again, you heard him. I don't know, guys. We'll have to keep an eye on things. I know some people are going forward with it now, trying to process it, and now trying to come to grips with it. And okay, well, now that we got Chad Brinker leading the charge, and he's going to bring in this new GM, and he's going to do this and that, and we're again, that's fine if you want to go that way right now. He does come from the Packers. There is a lot of positivity with the Packers franchise, as we mentioned already. 8 divisions won, but they do highlight the fact they won a Super Bowl. I would just throw out there that was his first year there, so I don't think can't say that he didn't have no part of it, but it wasn't like he was building it. So ultimately, all I got is what he's done so far in Nashville. He's been here 2 years as well. He looks like he gets a pass and gets to live more days in the sunset, so to speak. And Rand Carthon, I don't know, man. We still haven't really technically ever heard from J-Rob. I don't know if we'll ever hear Rand's side of the story. They don't, GMs who get fired don't really share their side of the story, but hopefully it's someday we will on both of them. So thank you so much. Again, tighten up. Shout out to our sponsors of today's video, BetUS. Definitely check out the description, and we'll be back more later on. So take care. Tighten up.